Sandra, I'd like to request like a 1-minute break so I can change a memory card.
Oh no, I can get stuff that's not on video, that's great. Good evening everyone, I'm Harkness, and I've been asked to come here tonight to speak about an extremely boring day. Before I do that, I do want to speak about something that's fairly interesting to all of you and a little bit briefer. As you know, we had to cut the entire Community Action and Pride program as part of the budget cuts. We, in our discussions and listening to conversation that we all had together, one of the things that was very clear is that small grants to neighborhoods and neighborhood associations are extremely important in keeping things going. So we were able to pull $100,000 out of a reserve line item and continue Community Action and Pride, albeit at a smaller level, for this next year. So what we're doing now is making a couple of changes. One is we are going online for the first time. We're going to use a web grants application. We're also going to make sure that, because it's online, we'll provide opportunities for training and support for people, both in a classroom setting with computers in front of you and individual tutoring if anybody should need that, including if there are folks who need it in Spanish as well. We occasionally get 1 or 2 applications in Spanish, and we want to make sure that the online does not become a barrier to that. So the other change is that we are making sure that the grants get spread around, so there's a maximum for any one project of $2,500 and a maximum of any group for $5,000. That still, I think, allows you to do quite a lot of good work. $5,000 for $2,500 per project, $5,000 per group as a maximum application. So no group can apply for more than $5,000 funding, and they'd have to have 2 separate projects to do that. So I'll get the information out to everybody who's signed up here. We'll be sending a letter out hopefully early next week with a link to the email address. We are trying to go live with the applications by December 13th, more or less, and they will be open until probably about February 25th. Within that period of time, we will have training sessions either at libraries or community centers. We're still working out the details, and we'll let folks know about the time and location of those as well. Elsa?
I'm kind of confused on the math. If you have only $800,000,
Correct.
and you have multitudes, because we've had as many as 72 groups apply for CAP grants. So if you have a multitude of groups that apply for a CAP grant, even at $2,500, is your cutoff point $100,000? That's it, no more?
And we only have 100,000. The maximum grant is 2,500. The grants can be much smaller than that. They can be 500, they can be 1,000, they can be 750. So we will see what comes in. It will be a tough call. And we're focusing the grant around the priorities that you have identified that came out of the neighborhoods in crisis, but apply it broadly around clean, safe, and engaged. So we're going to be funding grants that provide for neighborhood cleanliness, neighborhood safety, and neighborhood engagement. And that'll be part of the tough struggle of deciding of all the worthy stuff. We know we could do $500,000 in grants and fund great work. But that's part of why we lowered it to the level, and we're going to be a stretch.
And will that still be coming before a CAP grant committee?
I'm not sure what the whole process will. I think it will follow the process that it did last time with the committee. It includes neighborhood representatives.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions on that? Okay. What I want to talk about today is I want to try to give you as straight a talk as I am capable of in terms of my depth of understanding of where we are as a redevelopment agency and where we are looking to go, specifically in terms of financing. I'm going to get into a lot of arcane stuff, and I'm going to be trying to be as clear as I am able to. And at any point that I am wandering off somewhere that doesn't make any sense, please throw a rock or a stone at me, or have Harvey come over and knock on me, and I'll correct here. I want to start with...
Not empty, Harvey.
Yeah, that's a full one. So let me start with the basics of how redevelopment in California is financed, and then I'll get very specific to San Jose. There's a mechanism called tax increment financing. Our TIF is it's generally called, our TI, as you hear it more commonly referred to, which is how redevelopment pays its bills. And what happens, and we'll use your home if you're a property owner as an example. So if you're a property owner, you pay a set amount of property tax every year. That property tax is distributed among various taxing entities. The city, county, school districts primarily, water district, and then special districts and special bond measures tacked onto it. So if your home is worth $250,000, if there are homes out there that are that affordable these days, $250,000, and your tax rate is $2,000 bucks every 6 months, then that's your property tax base. Let's start. We'll call it a base. What redevelopment does, as you know, is it declares a certain area a redevelopment area. It makes a finding of blight, and it says we want to make this a redevelopment area and redevelop it using the tools of redevelopment. Once it does that, it establishes whatever the property tax is. Now this is a property tax for the whole area, not just an individual house. That becomes the base. All of the existing property tax continues throughout the life of the redevelopment area to be distributed among those taxing entities in the same way that it was before. What changes, however, is the theory of redevelopment, at least, is that redevelopment begins to make investments, and over time, and some of this occurs naturally anyway, the value of that property increases. And so what you have here is you have a difference between the base and this value. Of course, in California, the rate of increase here is governed by Proposition 13, so you can only get a 2% increase a year unless you sell the property, in which case it's reassessed at a new rate. But this growth is the growth of both existing properties and properties as they're sold. So the base remains constant. And what you get is you get a gradually increasing amount of taxes that come in. This is known as the increment, because it's the increment of taxes between the total tax rate and the base. This money is largely captured by the redevelopment agency. Now, obviously, there are winners and losers in this. The redevelopment agency being one of the large winners. Who are the losers? The primary losers are the county, the city, and to a lesser extent, some of the other taxing entities. The school districts actually are not really necessarily the losers, depending on what type of school district they are. And I'll get into that just really quickly because I think it's important to know because there's so much focus on adequate funding for the schools in particular.
When you say city, you mean the general fund of the city?
The general fund of the city. Property tax that goes into redevelopment agency, if the redevelopment agency didn't exist, would otherwise go into the general fund of the county and the general fund of the city. So this is sort of the basics in theory. The specific in San Jose is that this, of course, has been happening. And where we find ourselves is that, as I said, there are a number of redevelopment areas. Strong Neighborhoods is the largest and the most recent, which you are probably very familiar with. However, we do not collect currently tax increment in Strong Neighborhoods. Downtown, you're also familiar with. Very little tax increment is collected there, but it accounts for very little of our revenue stream. About 90% of the money that redevelopment collects and uses comes from North San Jose. In particular, there are 3 redevelopment areas that were adopted a long time ago when North San Jose was mobile homes and orchards that account for about 90% of all of the income. And you know, the argument that redevelopment makes, and if Harry were here, Harry Mavrogenis were here, he would tell you, is that without the investments in flood control, without the investments in shift from having those be mobile homes, which was the priority use in the area, that things like Cisco, which are now headquartered in North San Jose, would not have happened. So a lot of the tax increment is directly related to redevelopment and city investments in the area. But that aside, about 90% of the funds that redevelopment uses comes from those areas in North San Jose. So almost all of the work in downtown that you see, all of the work that you see, $104 million that has historically been invested in Strong Neighborhoods over the last 10 years, is a result of a transfer from North San Jose to Strong Neighborhoods. So, is everybody with me so far? Is this making sense? Okay, so let's take a look at a little bit where we are and the problem we've gotten ourselves into. So, let's see, we'll just go kind of move this out, make this today. So our current tax increment is pretty impressive. We pull in over, and I should get the exact figure, I apologize for not having it on top of my head, but the current tax increment is over $180 million a year. Now, when I say that, you think, oh, we should be fine, right? $180 million a year, we should be just rolling in the money. Well, the way that redevelopment works, and has worked historically, is that we have chosen to bond against that money. What does bond against the money mean? It means to borrow against a future stream of revenue. Easiest way to think about bonding is similar to what you do when you buy a house. You say, give me enough money to buy this house today, and I will pledge my bond, my word in this case is my bond. I will pledge a future stream of money, my income, to pay back this debt obligation. We do exactly the same thing in redevelopment, but rather than having a stream of income, we pledge a stream of property tax. That's our stream of income. So if this is the increment, what happens is, where does this increment go? Well, right now, there's right below this increment, there's this dotted line all the way down to 0 here. That's debt service, paying off the debt that we've borrowed. Redevelopment Agency has approximately $2.2 billion of debt. It's a very significant amount of debt. And so almost all of the tax increment is pledged toward that debt repayment. So what happened recently is something that was unprecedented in the history of redevelopment, is that not only did our tax increment go flat, which it's done before, it actually dropped, and not just a little bit, it dropped a lot. So what happens is, if you think about it, what does a 7% drop in your tax increment mean? It doesn't sound too bad, right? You've only got 7% left. Well, that top 10% is the money that you have to play with. So 7% drop means your entire disposable income is gone. So that's the crisis that redevelopment is in San Jose today. And that's why that 7% drop is so devastating. Unfortunately, it gets a little worse than this. So here's the deal. What are in addition to the debt, which is a primary obligation of the redevelopment agency, what are the other obligations and expectations on the redevelopment agency in addition to debt repayment? In addition to debt repayment, the redevelopment agency is expected to make a series of payments. And I'm not going to go into all of them, but I want to go into some major ones to give you a sense of the flavor of it. And this one is the most complicated of them, the others are more straightforward. But right about the same time that this happened, the state, of course, was in their own particular pickle for not too dissimilar reasons. Part of their solution was to take from redevelopment agencies money and take it back into the state coffers. It's called CRAF. And I won't go into the whole abbreviation because it really doesn't relate to what the money was used for. But the CRAF take from the state was proportional to the size of the redevelopment agency. So a small redevelopment agency like Cupertino, I think they had to make an $80,000 payment or something like that. I'm not sure if I got my numbers exact. Our payment is $75 million. $75 million or thereabouts. Now, we didn't have the cash on hand. We didn't make it as a cash payment. That was due on May 10th. We made a payment. Where did we get the money? We borrowed the money from housing loan. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit. In redevelopment law, one of the first things that happens, if this is the money that's coming in, 20% of it goes by law to affordable housing. And that can be spent anywhere in the city to support the creation or preservation of affordable housing.